Good morning, good morning. Let's go ahead and jump right into this. Got an interesting session ahead of us. Let's go ahead and look at our pre-market insight. We don't have anything on the calendar today. All right, so we don't have to worry about that. Let's take a quick glance at our power range. For NQ, for the power range report, we got a high of 15,130 and 3/4 with a low of 15,116. The sentiment is neutral, up 0.11% at the time of this posting, with a volume of 43K and an ATR of 163.36. Taking a look at the chart, we can see at the open we had some sell-off at the PR -2, and then we retraced that, slightly trading bullish for this session back to PR +1, but we're just kind of hanging around pretty much from the European session. Haven't really made much of a move. We are trading with light volume. That's across the board, leading into our futures market pulse. You can see we had similar price action with ES, RTY, and YM. All of them trading within their power ranges, kind of hanging out sideways, light volume across the board, and nothing else to really see in the other parts of the futures market that I track. More so bullish with crude oil, and pretty much the same neutral story with GC and E6. So what are y'all saying out there?
Well, I kind of want to pick up where you left off with the kind of update on where we are. So last time we met, if you can remember, we got a huge amount of volume to try to break down because we had we had the sell off that we caught the previous week before that, and we had the market participant come in. We had participation come in. We're pushing off of the lows, trying to find value. And there's a seller sitting on the offer. By the time we show up last week, the seller sitting on the offer brought the market down to where we found a buyer and we're finding support inside that low that we put in previous weeks, and then that high that we had just painted again previous week. So we were sitting in between that, and then we had an offer come in, pushing us all the way down. Everybody thinking we're going to break down even further, maybe go down to the lows, and a buyer steps in, absorbs all that selling, and where we are now is we've seen a lift since then, and then a break to new highs, and then another seller step in, sitting on the offer. We've come down to test that support, and now we're sitting in the middle again. And we found a buyer here on the long-term charts that is supporting where we are now as we're coming in to test the seller. I think that's worth pointing out, kind of just giving us a context of how much we've traveled and the sequence of the travel that brings us present for the day, because we're now in the position where we're watching this buyer. We're going to see what they're going to do to this offer that's sitting at our new highs that we've got to break above or keep going sideways or break below. We're watching the buyer now, so I show volume at 143. I'm going to also be a little bit less vocal on the squawk today, but I think I will definitely be identifying where we get huge amounts of participation to show up. I'm going to really be vocal about where it's being caught at. For example, are we seeing a whole bunch of sellers inside the bid? You know, where our buyer is supporting it. I think that'd be a key level where everyone needs to be paying attention, because that's where we typically get our next rotation up or down. That seller's going to either follow through or they're going to get unwound from that position. Vice versa on the offer. We've got a buyer up there. But right now we're just what I've been noticing for the past few sessions is we've been seeing some of the best intraday action that I've seen in a while, and I judge it by triggers. Everyone takes a trade because they're triggered to. And
Hmm.
what I've been witnessing is this market is really finding ways to trigger participation on both sides, but keep it in its range. And that's the whole point. Like we need participation, and it's finding it to a degree when I don't think typically we would have participation being triggered at these areas. So I'll stop there. Again, we're just watching this buyer volume at 143 still, and we still have an offer here. Offers at 144. We're just watching to see how they react to this buyer coming in before the open. One thing that I forgot that I wanted to get your input on, Rob, is these mechanical levels that we've been identifying. Yesterday was again one of these days where I observed them, our participants, really, mostly the machines, rotate off of the mechanical levels as they broke volume point of control. Well, how far are we going to go? Well, we reached that mechanical level, whether it be value area high or low, found liquidity, and then returned back to volume, and then reversed on the opposite side, and then returned back to volume. Did you notice any of that? Because they are really, it was much of a mechanical play.
Yeah, I definitely noticed that yesterday, and I'm looking at the same thing right before you started talking about that. Like
Yep,
we
that's
have
why I brought it up.
we have I have this balance level here at 146, which is falling right in line with um, the value area, or yeah, the sort of the value area that was created within the last few hours,
Hmm.
and they're just sticking to their levels for now.
Right, exactly, for now. Not only that 146 level you called out, I showed us 146 halves, but interestingly enough, there's also a node there. I haven't really mentioned my nodes too much, on the Tuesday streams. The first couple of ones we did, they were essential. I always pointed them out because these nodes is where volume is taking place at a price, and they haven't been touched for retest. So when an offer comes in, where did the most of the participation take place at a price when that offer came in? I keep saying offer, but we'll say buyer. It goes vice versa. So there is an offer up here at 146 halves as well as that mechanical level. And interestingly enough, guess what's happening? Just as we saw, I think the last time we were on stream when we called it out, and I said it'd be interesting to see if we get the accumulation up there, then the return back to volume, and it did just that. Here it is again, right before the open. We're seeing the exact setup. And I think after I said that, I said something to the lines of, we're just watching the exact same thing happen every single day. It's just in its own unique, organic way, but it's the same truths every day. And
Hmm.
here we go, return back to volume. Another observation is we've got this creepy, creepy low volume um, before the open, and they're really balancing the books again. When I say balancing the books, I'm talking about the imbalances that we typically see for triggers on order flow. Someone's on both sides balancing that.
And it's kind of, and it with that, how they're painting this picture for to how the way I call it is they're marketing to other participants in the market they on the daily they have it set up to where it could potentially break higher. So if I was, just looking at it from just the perspective of a retail trader that just looks at candlesticks and looks at the patterns, I would be expecting at some point a break into the highs, to new all-time highs, which, if they allow it to play out like that, if they move the market in that way, I'd be interested to see, well, what their reasoning is for shaping it that way, or what how if we get followed through, or if they're just playing it to try to introduce some new sellers into the market so we can get liquidity. What exactly they're trying to do with it. But that's the picture that they're painting so far from my perspective.
I agree with that. Yeah. There's, I call it the way that I say it is they're searching for value.
Hmm.
They're really trying to see where they can move price to find participation to transact with their business. And we're still at volume. So we're hanging out at volume. The trend is continuing. Price 43, volume at 43. And again, just for caveat to note, my volume point of control is active. It's not going to be the same for everyone. It's very fast, but I'm showing it 143 is where volume is and has been being conducted.
Mine is in the same location for now. All right, got less than 3 minutes to the bell.
I'm going to give a shout out to a trader named Happy out there. Hopefully, he's listening to the stream today. Uh, from my understanding, he's typically a breakout trader, and he's had to switch out to the mean reversion. And I know he made a nice bag off of yesterday's action, just taking advantage of the fact that we've got someone on both sides trying to transact, and they're bringing it right back to volume.
Yeah, the mean reversion strategies, it's been the way lately, for a while.
I have to agree with that too, because technically I'm doing a version of it with the two programs that I run. One thing I will note as we're coming into the final minute before the open is we've got someone buying, we've got buyers coming in on the retail side, and then as an inverse, there's there's a participant accumulating and sitting on the offer on NQ as we're finding participation to the buy sides very aggressively before the open on the retail side. And we're at the mechanical level again, 146 halves. We're seeing the rotation and response just as I call it out. Our offers move to 145 and a quarter. How will our buyer respond? Because we still have an offer accumulating on the institution side as these buyers are coming in on the retail side and starting to be unwound. 5 seconds left. That was very creepy. How that happened? It's just so interesting watching these opens. Like not to my surprise, um, this has kind of happened where we're seeing this offer now come in as our buyer choked. Was gonna go for it, found that there again is an offer at 146 halves, pulled the liquidity, offer comes through. Now we're testing our lower auction block 138, goes as deep as 136 halves, and we're seeing how our buyer responds to this offer that's come in. They've eaten up all of that liquidity. We're back at volume.
Just watching this at this point, we did break into new session highs, and we are currently retesting. But it's very volatile at the open on still low volume. I'm not
Kind of
trying to.
made it a point to be quiet with that move
Mm-hmm.
because look at what's happening now.
Yep.
They did we caught a huge amount of participation on both sides of the market, in retail side and the institution side, to where we found huge amounts of buyers to get trapped at 151 while people participants are being triggered as we break this new high to buy. There's a passive offer just sitting there eating all of that liquidity, and look where we are now. So we are now at 133, price 133. We've got both of the markets have now flipped to where our sellers are being triggered. Now, how's our buyer going to respond? I haven't found our buyer yet. They're not down here.
Nope.
So that's just printed.
So that is a response off VWAP at around 128. There's also a 200 SMA there. Just just taking note of it. I don't really put a whole lot of weight into the 200, but we do get responses off of it. But this response is off of those two indicators.
There's a battle for the 136 price, and our seller is sitting on the offer there. We did see buying come in to try to push higher following that offer that came in off of the open, and price is heading south. 124. We're starting to pick up huge amounts of participation as price moves lower. To the short side, our buyers now at 124 halves, accumulating within these sell orders coming into the market. How will our seller respond? We're getting bursts of sell orders to come in with slight tick moves down, but our buyers still supporting the market 124 and 3/4 now. How's our seller going to respond? Starting to be unwound as prices moving north, but we still have a seller here sitting on the offer. Our buyers starting to eat up the liquidity more. On the institution side, they flipped and now they're now buying, followed by the retail side now buying. still have an offer sitting on the sell side, sitting on the offer, not allowing price to move higher. Buyer's still at 124 and 3/4. And when I say that we have an offer sitting on the offer, what I'm specifically referring to is there's not necessarily sell orders hitting the market, but there's supply on the books. And each time a buyer comes in, it's replaced and reloaded with more supply, and they're sitting on the offer. So our buyer has to eat that for price to go higher. Seller at 133 and a quarter. We're now testing our buyer where they stepped into support at 124 and 3/4. Our buyer showed up down there now at 125. Our seller's at 130 and 3/4, price 129. Now have a fight at 128 and 3/4. Buyers are starting to make movement to the north side and accumulate participation to the buy side on both sides of the market.
Yeah, I'm looking at that 136 price, as a typical break. Just looking at it as like what I call a takeout trade, but there is a lot of resistance right above that for the buyers to fight through.
Yep,
So
we still have a seller at 131, and they've now moved to 128 and 3/4, so the fight's not over.
yep.
Also to note, we've been seeing momentum decline since the open, and
Hmm.
interestingly enough, it came in crazy, but we did get, quadruple digits volume here. Excuse me. We got over 10,000 contracts that come in on the open. So that's interesting. I wasn't expecting that much considering how the trades were transacted. They acted as if it was nothing at all. All right. So that just printed. And our sellers are continuing to accumulate. Buyer now at 120. I was looking at that area of support for our buyer, but they did not have follow through. They pulled.
Hmm.
Now I'm curious to see if they did it in a way to where they're able to hide their orders and we continue going north, or if we've got a real seller here and they're going to continue to pull to find liquidity before we then go up. Buyer's still at 120, taking on quite a bit of sell orders on both sides of the market. All right, So we just got a wave of selling to come in that pushed a couple of points below to where our buyer was underwater, but they're still balancing and supporting price. Price 118, buyer 120, now 122. All of those sell orders trapped are starting to unwind as we move north. 126, 125, 126. We've got a mechanical level right here where it looks like someone's sitting on the offer. Watching the flow, there's a buyer here eating the liquidity as they're attempting to push past this resistance. And this mechanical level at 126 still showed the buyer at 120. Starting to see a massive amount of participation coming on both sides of the market. We've got the market flipped now. Finding resistance at VWAP on my chart, I showed it at 132 here. We've got increased participation. This is the first time this has happened since the open. Volume has moved down here at 129. Our seller is eating the liquidity that came into the buy side, triggered by that aggressive move by our buyer. So that is now printed. And this is kind of referring to what I was saying before the open, how we've got a participant on both sides of the book that's really balancing out these imbalancing of the order flow. Because how I would see that as a bottom would be a great bottom, just it's not reflected by the flow and the participation. So it's not a trigger for me, unfortunately.
Yeah, me either.
Volume.
I got a couple signals there, but it's just seeing too much of a battle for me to actually pull the trigger and maintain a good risk to reward.
So we got an offer at 130 halves, volume at 129. We're kind of watching our buyer get squeezed out of this, but they're still here. Buyers now moved to 128. Buyers still supporting the market and taking on heavy supply. And when I say that, I mean that there is sellers sitting on the offer. Our buyer has to do that to push higher. Seller now 128 in front of volume at 129. Our buyer is still here, taking on a lot of sell orders now to support price at where it is. They're still here, taking on a lot of sell orders to support price at this level. Now we're testing volume 129. Our offer has moved to 129. With that push that we just saw, we've accumulated a lot of positions to the buy side. Price 133 now. But it's stalling as we've got a passive seller sitting on the offer, accumulating to this liquidity, most likely triggered by that break. How is our buyer going to respond? They're throwing more inventory into the market. Looks like this is the way they want to go. This is the most single transacting we've seen since the open. Lots of delta on the board, and that prints. So yeah, they got away with it. So like I, identified, somebody, they're getting very clever with this. I'm just gonna say it, man. It's a very competitive market, and Hopefully this isn't a new trend, but it painted the picture for a good bottom. And it did it in just the way so we're at a mechanical level here, 142, where we're seeing a lot of accumulation, participation come in, but no price movement. And as evidence of that, volume has now moved on the retail side to price at 143, price now 141. As a response, we've got inventory on the buy side as we continue the push north. Now we're we're looking at possibly even more buy volume. This will be the greatest that we've seen since the open, but it's getting stalled here as the mechanical level is moving higher, 146, which is where it was originally before the open. Also, with this second move of the buy side, we've got increased participation. Interestingly enough, that volume is now starting to get unwound. Volume 143, mechanical level 146. Caught a whole bunch of buy orders. Let's see if that really was the objective or if this is really a buyer building a position. Okay, so that prints. From my interpretation, that's a buyer building a position. We've, we've got participants triggered by that, and that's being reflected in the order flow on both sides of the market. We've got a seller that's eating the liquidity triggered by that, seller at 150. How's our buyer going to respond? Are we going to continue this push north? So we've got our passive sellers sitting on the offer. Market is bid, they're buying. And our seller has got the supply sitting on the offer, eating up the buy liquidity. We're at volume right now, 143. Where our buyer is finding support, they've moved to 142 3/4. Just as I say that, we get a massive amount of sell orders hitting the market. We push below the 142 3/4. Just as I say that, our buyer responds. We're now above that level in volume. Buyer defending the position. Seller still on the offer.
And I'm mostly spectating at this point. But I am looking at this potentially being our initial balance, especially with the volume still being relatively low. But we're still seeing a response at these mechanical levels.
Exactly, because where that rejection took place, 146. It moved to 146. It's been one. It moved to 147. It's been 146 for a while, but we caught a lot of buyers up there, and they're having to defend the position here at volume. And they are. Our buyers moved to 143 halves, price 145. They're going for it again. Let's see if they've got the inventory. They've got the supply. So there's a participant at 147
Mm-hmm.
that just ate a lot of liquidity there. We rejected it, moved back to volume, tested volume. We're getting an explosive amount of contracts to the buy side, pushing past this 147 halves level. Buyer now at 150 again. Excuse me, offer now at 150. Buyer having enough of this. We've got transactions heavy on both sides of the market as they're attempting to break higher. Seller at 151 and 3/4, eating this liquidity. Lot of participants triggered to the buy side as the market is squeezing them. Sellers move to 150 now. Let's see. Those positions are starting to be unwound. Now we're at the mechanical level 147 where we find support and a slight spurt in an attempt to get to 150 as we're witnessing now. Buyers able to reach it. They're throwing in the inventory. They're going for the push. There's still someone on the offer eating this liquidity. Seller 151 and 3/4. Seller 151 and 1/4. Buyer still here. Price 149. Starting to see the buy orders unwind. Seller still on the offer, brought it back to the mechanical level. Now 147 halves, where we see a battle taking place. Let's see how long this lasts. I can see a seller aggressively come in below that. Lots of buy orders that were triggered long
Mm-hmm.
are unwinding. More than half of the buy participation side are gone out of that position, but our buyers still here. 145 price, 146, 147. Sellers way up there at 151 and 1/4. And as I'm looking at the imbalances at these prices to show the aggressiveness of the orders coming in, there's a seller here as our price is attempting to go back to that initial offer 151 and 1/4. They're just slamming it, and our buyers being pushed back at volume. And how that was done, okay, let's see.
The way that that's printing on the 1 minute and the 3 minute, we would expect to see some rollover here.
Right, that's what we would expect. Let's see how this develops, because we're sitting at volume now, and for whatever reason we're hanging out here for quite some time. Just as I say that, an offer comes in. Okay, so the most selling that we've seen since the open is taking place right now, following that call out by you. And this is, what I would call a top. We identified the bottom, but this top printed in a way to where I could take a trigger. And there is a very aggressive buyer on the opposite end of this, really fighting to support the market. As they're eating this self liquidity very aggressively. All of that selling is starting to be absorbed here by the rotation. And just as I say that the seller is still here on the offer,
Mm-hmm.
back at volume. I'm a little late on my squawking, but what we've seen is all of those sellers jump ship as price moved north. But guess what? We got someone sitting on the offer at 150,
Mm-hmm.
taking full on advantage of the effect of that happening and eating all of those were sellers, now buyers, as they're triggered to buy here up top. Seller at 150, price 147. How's our buyer going to respond? Are we really going up to break out of this? Offers moved to 148 now. Just as I say that, huge amount of buy contracts hit the market. Seller moved to 150.
And we've seen sellers in a lot in this at this level, so that did print to be a setup for a breakout. So we do have it would be some sellers trapped if they do manage to follow through with the breakout and actually have real follow through. And we still see sellers. Just looking at the price action, we can still see sellers jumping in here.
And they've caught so many buyers with that as they're now being unwound as
Mm-hmm.
prices now moving down. Okay, looks like our buyer's going for the attempt again. The market is set bullish for this breakout. Huge amount of transacting to the buy side just splashed in. The most that we've seen since the open.
Mm-hmm.
interestingly enough, they're holding price. We've got an offer at 155 and 3/4 that ate this. How is our buyer going to respond?
Now, for that kind of break, I would expect to see more stronger follow through than that. But they
It
still
got
are.
the volume.
They
The
still are
volume. Go ahead.
good. They're still painting the picture for it to continue to continue to push the price higher. Just
I
looking
tend
at,
to agree with that.
yeah.
If this breaks down, it's gonna be quite the shocker for me, but at the same time too, it's painting the picture for a beautiful breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
So anyone looking for opportunity to take advantage of this would be what they would need to see for the breakdown, because we did get the most buying that we've gotten since the open, and now it's being pulled by this offer that came at 155 and ate it. Wow. And we're now selling. We've got sell orders accumulating on both sides of the markets at volume 145, pushing below volume. Really watching to see how our buyer responds here because, people called that a failed auction.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not taking my normal position, but that would have just triggered and failed off of what just happened. As I said, they were painting the picture for this. Incredible. Now the most selling that we've seen since the open is taking place right now. Very curious to see how our buyer responds. Also at my VWAP is where we are now,
Mm-hmm.
eating up liquidity. Buyer jumps in, has unwound quite a bit of selling on both sides. How's our seller going to respond? They still have the supply and they're going for it. Just as they go for it, buyer smacks in with some more transactions, but not much of an effect on price. Looks like they've taken 136. Let's see if we get 136 to hold. Push to 135. Price 133 now. Move down to 133 and a quarter. There is an attempt to support the market here. That printed as a response, massive amount of selling right out the gates. We're at a mechanical level here, 130, where a huge amount of selling was absorbed, only to be followed through with a massive amount of selling coming into the market again. Wow. Buyer holding the 130 level, our mechanical level, eating up a lot of sell liquidity. How's our seller going to respond? Looks like they have the supply. It's right there on the offer. Price is being held up at this mechanical level, 130, where a lot of sellers, or this liquidity is being eaten by a passive buyer now, unwinding the selling. Market is flipped on the retail side. They're now buying.
That did trigger me into a position. So I'm looking at this. The VWAP is kind of the midpoint with the 120 to 116 range being the floor.
Price is looking north, attracting some buyers. We get a seller to passively step in. Now we're playing with the rotation here. More buying coming in on the retail side. Institution side's lagging, but they have now flipped in their buying. Looks like we've got someone sitting on this VWAP here, eating up the buying liquidity as it comes in. As a response, our buyer throws more inventory into the market. And as a response, our seller brings it right back down. Alright, so that printed. Our buyer has to support 130 now, 130 and 3/4. Let's see if it's going to happen, or if we're going to get a punch below. Because they're selling, there's the punch below. How's our buyer going to respond? They're holding, they're eating the liquidity to protect the print. But there is a seller here aggressively sitting on the offer and throwing supply into the market as we break below. Mechanical levels move to 128 now. We're seeing a lot of liquidity get absorbed here as these sells are being triggered. Buyer at 129 halves. And they're coming with more supply as we break below. There is a buyer here, but there's a lot of supply here too.
Mm-hmm.
Got a huge punch of supply to come in, and a quick response by our buyer to get back up to their position 126 3/4. They're fighting. We're getting back up to the mechanical level 128 on the institution side, 130 on the retail side, having trapped a lot of sell orders down there. More than half of them unwound. Buyer now at 130. A lot of sellers got trapped, and price is moving north. Buyer at 130, price 132 now. We're really seeing our sellers sit on the offer to try to bring this back down, testing the buyer at 130 and the mechanical level at 130 on the retail side. Lots of transacting here. We've got to increase the participation on both sides of the market with this move here. Buyer really getting aggressive, holding back this offer. Like, this is very aggressive price action. As they flip the rotation north now, they're having to respond to a seller throwing supply on the books for them to break through. Now we're back south. That Prince buyer at 130. Huge amount of inventory comes into the market. Our buyer's going for the push. Now we're really going to see how our offer responds to this as they're sitting here 135 and a quarter. 134 and 3/4. Price 133. They're eating away this liquidity coming to the buy side. And hitting them with the supply. All of those buyers are really being absorbed. Very nasty. Buyers still in the market though. Support at 130, price 132, offer 134 and 3/4. Buyer stepped in 132. Offers moved to 134 and 3/4. Underwater now. We've got buyers accumulating on both sides of the market as they attempt this push. Sellers not going to let it come that easy. They're pushing it back to their position 134 3/4. Buyers being squeezed now. Price 131. Have not tested the buyer yet at 130. They're in front of it. Going for the push again. The moment they touch 134 then 3/4, massive amounts of selling comes in and they reload the offer. Aggressive seller in front of 134.75 across multiple prices. Buyer moved to 132 and a quarter in front of their node. Lots of fighting happening here. Buyers making some headway only to get squeezed back down. Interesting to note, with all of what I'm describing, it's happening with decrease in momentum. So this is when I refer to them putting on a great show. This is when they put on the great show. There's no participation where they can really make it seem like they're doing something they're really not.
Yep.
And with that being said, we get a huge amount of sell orders to come into the market, break below our buyer's low, punch below the 130, got all the way down to 121, price now 126. On the institution side, it's not really supporting the volume that came in short on the retail side. Our buyer is still here kind of protecting this area. And bam, massive amount of sell orders coming off that print. Out of nowhere, we get a buyer to step in 122 and 3/4. They fling price back into the mechanical level 130. The node up there is the 134 and 3/4. Where our seller's going to have to respond to this very aggressive amount of buying that's coming into the market now. So much so that it's moved volume down here. Volume's now at 134 where the market is. Just looking at price action, we can see that there's a seller sitting right there, eating it. What is our buyer going to do to respond? They're still here. All those transactions that we recently saw that came in is stopped, only to be squeezed back down. The mechanical level down here is 124, price is 125. All of that buying that came in got to 134, is being unwound. Our buyer's still here though. Price 125. Our seller has got so much supply, they were able to eat all of the buying that sprung in. Talking like 1,000, 4,000 contracts with a very bullish buy delta in the order, swung price all the way to 34. Our seller steps in, eats all that liquidity. We're back at the mechanical level now playing with price, where our buyer's also just in front of it. Mechanical level's 123. Down here on the retail side, buyers at 123 and a quarter, and they're underwater at the moment, but they're still buying. We've got increased participation with this move that we've just witnessed.
And the way that last 1 minute candle printed, we should be heading lower. And we're trying to do that as I say that.
So a buyer stepped in at 114 and 3/4 and ate a lot of liquidity. It isn't the most selling that we've seen, but it'll be the second most selling that's come into the market. Take a look at where this is on our block. Our buyer is flinging inventory into the market to try to push this higher, but we've got a seller with supply on the books and they're just reloading. Looks like our buyer's starting to make some headway. They flipped the rotation north, having trapped a massive amount of selling, only to squeeze these guys. So it's really moving. We're seeing these micro movements, just taking advantage of the micro chess moves before we rotate to the bigger move. Interestingly enough, this buyer is attempting to get back to that mechanical level, and that's where we've got a passive offer just absorbing the volume in front of it. As we go back north, south on the rotation. Buyer at 118 now. How are they going to respond? Sell orders coming in. Buyers still supporting the market, holding 118 for the moment as the rotation turns north again. Looks like we're taking this attempt again to touch this mechanical level, but again, there's a passive offer just sitting there in front of it. Rotation turning south. Now we're coming back to the buyer, not even able to get there.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that's just printed. Our buyer was still at 118. Out the gate, we got about 200 contracts buying with a buying delta. 300 contracts, 428 contracts coming in. Offer at 121. They're mostly buying. Let's see how much progress this buyer can make as they try to push north. Boom, we touch it. Let's see how they accumulate and transact at this level.
On the 1 minute, there is a break outside of the inside pair that was created with the last two candlesticks. So we should have got follow through there, but they're not. The buyers are not done, and of course our seller is just hitting them as they try to take the price higher.
Savagely sitting at these levels and absorbing the participation that comes in triggered to the buy side. But we do still have a buyer, 120 halves now, and they're still in the market as they're making the second attempt here. I'm starting to see transacting coming into the buy side. They're pushing, push. Price 125 now. So we've got in front of the 122 mechanical level. We've got a lot of buy participation too on this. And again, our seller's still on the offer, even though we've made progress. Let's see, our buyers still they still have to have inventory to push this. And even as I say that, seller 123 3/4 has got the market back below that mechanical level of 122. How's our buyer going to respond? I can see aggressively at the price. We've got sell imbalances, so they're really hitting it down here, trying to really unwind all that buying that came in, but our buyer's still here. They're going again to hit where our seller's sitting on the offer at 123 3/4. They're still here. We're at 124 now. Our seller is still on the offer. We got a battle here. And back down to the mechanical 122 level where we are now below 120's price. It appears our buyer's still here for the moment. I'm not sure for how much longer, as there's a seller coming in aggressively at the market trying to push this thing down. And it looks like all of that, our buyer's still here trying to fight. So that printed, and it's not really, let's just see what happens. They've got quite a bit of resistance to fight through if our buyer's still going to go for it. The offer's moved to 120, where we've got a fight in front of the 122 mechanical level. Okay, we got just a flung of, just a slew of buy transactions to come in, only to really be eaten up by someone sitting on the offer. The mechanical level has moved to 120, where our buyer is sitting now. Buyers are attempting to retake their position where our seller was sitting at the 123 3/4. They're punching through it. But our seller's still there, absorbing the liquidity as we're at this level. Our buyer's still pushing, push. They've got the inventory. They're bringing it to the market. Our seller is passively absorbing it as they're bringing it back to their position, 123 3/4. All that buying just being absorbed. How's our buyer going to respond?
Our buyer's definitely not done. It gave me a brief window to take a scalp there, but now our sellers are coming in strong.
super strong. They just ate all of that buying, and now we're going south. How's our buyer going to respond? They've shown that they're going to protect this level and really go for it, but did they give up? We've got sell orders accumulating down here, and just a massive amount of sell orders accumulating down here now. Buyer at 110. Now we're
And
seeing what the seller has to offer because our buyer is eating this up at the moment. But from what I've seen with the supply, like they'll just come with it. So buyer's still at 112. You can tell just doing everything they can to hold this back, but there is supply just reloading on the books. And it's heavy. Holding the market now 113 3/4 only to get hit with more supply on the offer. So that just printed our buyers at 113 1/4 now. We got increased participation on both sides of the market for that move, where our seller just came in with the supply to punch through our buyer. They did not get too far though.
watching to see what our seller does here. We do have I still do see a few levels, mechanical levels, where our buyers could be sitting. One with my PR -1, which is 106, and then the balance level at 93 3/4. But right now, our sellers have control over the market. They slowed momentum down. I think that's a good place for us to end the session for today. Another good one. A lot of interesting price action.
Well, good luck for the rest of the session, everyone.
All right. Trade it easy.
All right, man. Nice commentary.